Welcome to the Encore Audio Archives YouTube channel. I'm Taper Dave, and this is my channel. I've uploaded hundreds of talks here that I've recorded at meetings in West LA, and I've also recorded conventions starting in 2013. I've got a bunch of those up. And Walt and Mary Murray, the original owners of Encore Audio Archives, started the company in the 80s, and Walt recorded Joe and Charlie's and a bunch of stuff down in Vista, California. My sobriety date is June 20th of 1994. I hope you find something you like, so please like and subscribe to my channel and comment down below. If you want to hear something that I don't have or that you don't see, I'll see that I get it. Anyways, take care and have a great day if you want to.
I'm Herb. I'm an alcoholic. Hi. Well, welcome here Saturday morning at the Roundup. I have the nice coincidence that they started the Roundup the year that I got sober. Now, I didn't come to the first one because I'd just gotten sober and I was clueless, you know. I didn't know what anything was. I could barely find my way to a meeting. But I've been coming ever since from the second forward, and my sobriety date is February 21st, 1984. My sponsor's name is Lloyd. I got him in April of 1984, and he is still my sponsor. We'll talk a little bit about sponsorship today. Oh, that's the whole topic. Yeah, no, we will talk a lot about sponsorship today. And my home group is the Walteria Men's Stag Big Book Step Study Crosstalk meeting. And that's a mouthful, and the meeting is a handful, because it is a crosstalk meeting, very, very unusual in AA. That means anybody in the room can ask anybody in the room to clarify the sharing. And what specifically are you doing? What were your instructions? What is your relationship with your sponsor? Yeah, things like that. Most of the people keep coming back. Yeah, you got it. All right. What I would like you to do is to take the prayer sheet, which has the Serenity Prayer first in the event you do not know it. I don't anticipate or assume that anybody knows anything. So please join me in the Serenity Prayer. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Well, I've indicated that I'm Herb and I'm an alcoholic, and I have 27 plus years of sobriety, and I want to make it really clear, I'm not an expert. I have an undergraduate degree in college, but I have no advanced graduate degrees, certifications, or trainings. All right? I've been on the spiritual path ever since I was probably 8 years old. Seriously, when I went into the monastery at 17, I was there for 7 years, and I came out to find her. Good monk that I was. And then I found Alcoholics Anonymous, fortunately, 20 years later, and the rest is history. It's been my journey. So how many here are in AA? Okay, looks like the majority. How many are in not in AA, but are in Al-Anon? Oh, that's so wonderful. I'm really happy that you have an open mind and an open heart to come to a speaker from AA to talk about sponsorship, because I know that sometimes there's a little edge in Al-Anon about AA and the Big Book and alcoholics in general, and we earned the edge. We earned the edge. Exactly. How many are not in AA, not in Al-Anon, but are in a 12-step program? All right, so no outliers here. My workshops are normally based on the line from the first edition in the Big Book, where Bill suggests our way of living may have its advantages for all. So I do a weekly workshop in Palos Verdes and another weekly workshop in Santa Monica. It's a 12-month workshop in which we take people through the steps out of the Big Book, hoping that they will have what the promise of the 12th step is, a spiritual awakening, And it comes from all 12-step fellowships, but also even from people who are just coming from the local churches and are not in 12-step and know nothing about addiction or recovery, certainly about the Big Book or the steps. And if they come and if they stay and if they do the work and if they finish the work, did you hear all the qualifiers? Yeah. They will have what the 12-step promises, a spiritual awakening. So I'm very passionate about this process because it's what I looked for all my life. I'm very passionate about the 12 steps and the methodology and the precise instructions that are contained in the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous. All right? And not everybody has had the good fortune that I've had to be exposed to people who have the experience and the knowledge of the Big Book and the precise instructions and the path that it lays out. And I was one of those unfortunate ones. In my very first 4 years of being in Alcoholics Anonymous, I got a sponsor and I got a book and I read it and I worked the steps on my own, all right, with very little and probably no direction, and as a result of that, nothing happened. I did not change. I came to Alcoholics Anonymous and I thawed out on the outside. My life got a little bit better because I wasn't drinking and I was taking direction and I was beginning to learn about principles and integrity and those kinds of things. But I didn't change on the inside. And it was only when I was exposed to a man who understood the steps out of the Big Book, and he agreed to guide me through those steps, one step at a time, and it took 11 months that I began to thaw out on the inside. That was 1988. So ask yourself, this is a 3-day weekend. This is a Saturday morning. This is early Saturday morning, 9 o'clock by most standards. Ask yourself a question, but hear the question. Don't do ready, fire, aim. All right? Yeah. Allow the question to have its way with you. I'm going to do this periodically through our workshop today. I'm going to ask you a question. And I want you to hold the question rather than try to answer the question like that and be a good little student. All right? I want you to hold the question as if you really, really don't know the answer. And in the spirit of the prayer, of the serenity prayer and other prayers that I might teach you today, or expose you to, or at least invite you to pray, allow the Spirit to come and open your mind and open your heart so that that question takes root and takes you to a place that you didn't suspect and you didn't expect and perhaps even that you didn't know existed. This is my experience with this. The hospital said to me, Herb, what's your history with alcohol? What business is it of yours? I said, my wife's in the hospital for her drinking, not me. They said, no, just think about the question, Herb. What's your history with alcohol? How safe a question. But I had the grace to have the willingness, and I had the willingness to get the grace. We can't untangle that one. To answer that, to hold that question, to ask that question of myself. And then it began to reveal to me, in fact, that I had a drinking problem. That was my first sort of introduction to the possibility that I had a drinking problem. And of course, once you begin exploring that possibility, and in fact you do have one, it becomes pretty clear. I was not startled that I was an alcoholic. My father was an alcoholic. My wife is an alcoholic. My uncle and aunt, my wife's parents, I'm surrounded by them. I wasn't surprised that I was alcoholic. What I was surprised at is that I had not seen it. I mean, I'm 43 years old with a with an education in sort of liberal arts and reflection. I spent 7 years in silence in a monastery. You would think I would have some ability to know who I am and what I am and how I'm behaving and what I'm feeling. And I didn't. I was completely not connected to it. But the questions asked by somebody who I trusted, and the willingness to ask myself that question, to take in that question, allowed me to be taken to a place that I didn't even know existed. It's a simple question. This morning, this one. Why are you here? Yeah. Well, why did you come here? You knew I'm speaking. Maybe that's why you came. You perhaps knew that it's on sponsorship. Perhaps that you came for that. But be really clear why you're here. Because you're going to spend an hour of your precious life, or an hour and a half, or 2. I think I have to be out of here by 11, and we'll see how it goes. I'm planning on stopping sometime between 10:30 and 11. Nice margin, huh? So I hope you can stay until I end, but you're welcome to, because I know it's a busy schedule, or whatever, to leave when you need to, or take a break if you need a bio break or a smoke break or whatever, coffee break, and come back. Why are you here? Think about that. Come to some conclusion. When you walk out of here, let's say 11 o'clock, and you look back over your shoulder, how will you evaluate your time here? The value of it for you. What will it have done for you? What will it give you? Because I'm going to do some talking, and it's not, unfortunately, going to be a totally interactive workshop, although I'm quite happy to have interactive. I have notes that'll guide me. I have an idea as to where I want to go and how I want to end up, but I'm not attached to it, all right? I'm here to be with you and to spend some time talking about my experience with sponsorship and perhaps your experience with sponsorship, and answering some questions and asking some questions and sharing experience, because that's how we learn. One alcoholic sharing with another alcoholic our experience, all right? Now, I've done a lot of work and a lot of reading and a lot of study about sponsorship. I've got some training in spiritual direction, which is an analogous parallel path in the general world of spirituality to sponsorship. And I've got some training in psychology, which is an analogous parallel world to that of sponsorship. And they seem to have all lined up to give me an ability to work with people in a special way. But I was also told that I can't see that I don't see, and I don't know that I don't know. And as I looked at my own experience, certainly as I looked over my shoulder, I could see the truth of that. Einstein said the consciousness that created the problem cannot be the consciousness that solves the problem. It's brilliant. I don't read Einstein, all right? But I love phrases from people, and I heard somebody, probably a speaker, say that once, and I adopted it, of course, as we do, taking it as our own. And he said, the consciousness that created the problem cannot be the consciousness that solves the problem. We need new consciousness. We need to be awakened. And of course, that's the promise, isn't it, of the 12th step? To wake up, having had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps. I'm not paraphrasing. That's a direct quote. Having had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps. And my definition of a spiritual awakening comes from Appendix 2 out of the back of the book. It's a change. Now I will paraphrase. It's a change in the way we think and feel and behave, and it's done to us, not by us. It's a change in the way we think and feel and behave, and here's the key. It's not for self-help. It's for the helpless and the hopeless. It's done to us, not by us. that mysterious alchemic relationship of willingness and grace. Willingness and grace. I took that into meditation, that little conundrum, which comes first, willingness or grace. I didn't get an answer, but I got some poetry that satisfied me. I was taken to a place of willingness. Hear that. Grace of that. I was taken to a place of willingness. But I was willing to be taken. Absolutely did not answer the question. Which comes first, the chicken or the egg? I might have a little cartoon on that here. No, I don't. But anyway. But it can't answer the question. It's a mystery. Yes, I do have it. Because I do these I love sayings. I'm a wordsmith, and so somebody gave me this little postcard with a chicken in a barnyard with an egg in the barnyard on the grass, and it says, "And lo, the Lord gazed upon the chicken and upon the egg. And not knowing which should come first, shoveth he the egg up into the chicken, and it was good." Didn't answer the question, but it made it nice. It made it approachable, right? And so I was introduced to what's called a set-aside prayer. The consciousness that created the problem cannot be the consciousness that solves the problem. A Russian philosopher has said, "We're asleep dreaming that we're awake." Oh man, this is powerful. We're asleep dreaming that we're awake. We don't know that we're asleep. We're in this dreamlike state of awakeness, but we're asleep, and we don't know we're asleep. We can't see that we don't see, and we don't know that we don't know. Bill Wilson suggests in many places that we be willing to let go of our old ideas. Here's one on page 27. He talks about vital spiritual experiences that are phenomena. They appear to be huge emotional displacements and rearrangements. Ideas, emotions, and attitudes, which were once the guiding forces of the lives of these men, are suddenly cast to one side, and a completely new set of conceptions and motives begin to dominate them. An emotional rearrangement. This is a spiritual awakening. I won't quote the others, but there's several others here, except I will give the final one, which I think is as clear as any of them. It says on page 58, "Some of us have tried to hold on to our old ideas, and the result was nil until we let go absolutely." And this man who took me through these steps said, "Can you let go of your psychology and theology and philosophy and training and monk and AA and all the stuff that you've been exposed to and experienced? Can you let that go?" Absolutely. And I knew he was not into trick questions, so I said, "Absolutely not." And we continued with the work, and he gave me what is called the set-aside prayer, to set aside what I know about me, what I set aside about the spiritual life, about my brokenness, and about, at that time he called it disease or addiction, and about God, to be brought into a world that I didn't even know existed. And that's what happened. And this is the set-aside prayer, and I invite you to join me with the second prayer on this prayer sheet. God, please set aside everything that I think I know about myself, my brokenness, my spiritual path, and you, for an open mind and a new experience of myself, my brokenness, my spiritual path, and especially you. And it's so relevant today to talk about the set-aside prayer when we're coming in here to talk about sponsorship. Because there's no reference to sponsorship in the big book. You know that, and if you don't, now you do. Trust me, it's not there. The word sponsor is not in the Roman numerals, and the word sponsor is not in the Arabic numbers, pages 1 through 164. This is amazing to me, given that Bill came out of the Oxford group, which talked about sponsorship. And in fact, Bill called Ebby Thatcher his sponsor, even though Ebby Thatcher got drunk regularly. He continued to call him sponsor. Ebby finally got sober in the last 2 years of his life and died sober. And in the 12 and 12, of course, Bill talks about sponsorship. But not in the big book. He doesn't use the term. Pretty interesting to me. It's a question I raise. I won't answer. Here's the question that you need to ask yourself. Do I have a sponsor? It's one of the puzzle pieces, many, probably 6 or 8 puzzle pieces in our respective 12-step fellowships, meetings, book, prayers, service, steps, sponsorship. These are all the puzzle. I may have left out some of them, but these are the puzzle pieces of how the picture all comes together very nicely when they're all sort of integrated and used more or less correctly and with some consistency. Ask yourself, I'm not going to ask you, one of the principles I operate on is to never embarrass anybody and to create an environment that's quite a safe environment for you. You can be here and be invisible. You can be here and be engaged, but you will never be confronted. You will never be humiliated, and I will never initiate a question from you. I will never come to you and say, what do you think? No, I won't do that. All right? Now, if in fact you raise your hand and you tell me who you are, and if you care to tell me what fellowship you're in, then I will acknowledge you and we will have a dialogue. And once you've stepped onto the stage, then you're open game. Okay, it's right. Okay, but be real comfortable, real safe here, and I hope we learn some stuff today together and share some stuff today together and experience some stuff together. So do you have a sponsor? Now, when I ask people that on a one-on-one basis, 25% of them say, no. Or they hesitate, or they'll say, well, I used to. No, the answer is no, okay? And so 25% don't have a sponsor. And then of the others that say, yeah, I have a sponsor, I ask them, so when's the last time you talked to your sponsor? Well, 2009? Well, that's not a sponsor relationship. That's a fantasy, all right? A sponsor relationship, by my definition, by my experience, by my expectation, would be a consistent relationship. I mean, that vague, but it's a consistent relationship of interaction. And we're going to talk around this whole subject a lot, and I'm certainly hoping you'll share some of your experience as we go through this. Ask yourself the question, most people do this sort of robotically when they first come into the program because they're told to get a sponsor, so they do. But it's not a very rational process. It is somewhat of an emotional process. And if somebody likes somebody or they feel good around them, and that's great. Good. It might be good instincts, and then again, it might be not. So you have to ask yourself the question, what do you expect of your sponsor? What do you expect? Have you ever had that conversation with your sponsor? What your expectations are of them? And then equally as important, have you ever had the conversation what your expectations are of your sponsor? It goes both ways from my standpoint. And I didn't know that at the beginning. I asked Lloyd to be my sponsor. I didn't even know what a sponsor was. And he had been a drinking buddy of mine and had been sober 12 years at that time. So he was a guy who knew me. He was 6'5" like my father. He was 250 pounds like my father. I now know that some men choose their father's figures as sponsors, and some choose just the opposite for obvious reasons. And the same with women, I'm sure, although I have less information and experience with that. And he's comes from my religious tradition, and he was in my business, and we did some drinking together. So it all came together. He was sober for 12 years. And I said, so what do we do? He says, well, you call me every day and you go to a meeting every day. I understood the meeting part. I said, well, why would I call you every day? He says, because if you don't, I'll fire you. Oh. I mean, he didn't explain it. He told me what the consequences were going to be. Oh, okay. What do we talk about? I'm not used to calling anybody on a regular basis. And he says, you tell me what you're thinking and what you're feeling and what you're doing. Because your thinking's demented from 20 years of drinking. You have no feelings because they've been anesthetized by 20 years of drinking. And oh, by the way, as you thaw out, your feelings will return, and that will not be good news. Yeah, you guys know. I didn't know what I was in for. And your behavior is a function of your demented thinking and your anesthetized feelings. You're a train wreck, all right, to all the people around you. And I had gotten kind of an instinct about that. Yeah. And so I did. And I went to a meeting every day for 5 years, sometimes 2 a day. And I called him every day for 10 years. And we mutually agreed at that point that we would back off to three times a week unless we had an inclination to talk. We're good friends now, so we regularly and spontaneously call each other each week, probably 3 or 4 times. We'll get into some more of that later on. But I think those are very legitimate questions that you need to ask of your sponsor and of yourself. As a sponsor, what do you expect of me? And as a sponsee, what do I expect of the sponsor? And have that dialogue. And, you know, there's no rules, although there are some suggestions in this pamphlet from General Service Office. It's quite good, all right? I really recommend, in fact, I might have brought some in. Michael, did I bring some in? Yeah, and so they're yours for the taking if you want to take a pamphlet on sponsorship. If you want to contribute, that's fine, but I put them up there for free. I don't have a supply of this book, 12-Step Sponsorship, by a guy named Hamilton B., published by Hazelton, and I've read it twice. I don't find anything that I disagree with in it from my experience and information. It's really a wonderful, simple, very approachable book. How to be a sponsor, how to be a sponsee, and all of the sort of the questions that come in between, all of that. So I do recommend that. I think he has a comment here. A sponsor. Number 1, the primary responsibility of sponsors is to help their sponsees work the 12 steps. I hope there's no question about that. That's the job of a sponsor. My image is a sponsor, because this is my experience with this man who took me through the steps, that he was a lantern that stood by the path, that shone the light of his experience on the path that he had walked, so that I could walk that path and have my own experience. He was a lantern. It's unfortunate and a corruption of sponsorship where the sponsor begins to believe they're the light. But it's human, all right? It's very human. A sponsor is a lantern that shines the light of their experience on the path that they themselves have walked, so that I can walk that path and have my own experience. So many sponsors try to give their sponsees their experience. And once again, it's a corruption of sponsorship. But it's normal. It's the human thing. If it's good enough for me, it's certainly good enough for you. This is what I do. You do that too. And, you know, in terms of behavior, maybe that'll work short term, but it won't work long term. Second, a sponsor and sponsee have an obligation to discuss their mutual expectations, objectives, and requirements, if any, regarding the sponsorship relationship before they enter into that relationship. Hardly likely. I don't think we're going to do that. Nobody has that kind of consciousness or chutzpah, so it's okay to do it afterwards. 3, a sponsor shares his or her experience, strength, and hope with his or her sponsee rather than trying to run the sponsee's life. Big, big, big thing. Now, so many people who enter, at least in AA, I'm not in Al-Anon, I'm familiar with the vocabulary, and I spent about 6 months going to meetings and kind of getting acquainted back 15 years ago. But I can't ever say that I am really connected to a feel for the Al-Anon fellowship at all. So I'll speak from the AA fellowship. That is my experience. AAs, many of them come in pretty beat up. They have either had very poor parenting or none at all, or in their early adulthood or later adulthood, they've developed some really, really bad habits and no life skills. So it's really important for a sponsor to begin to give very strong, concrete, almost autocratic direction. Did you take a shower? Call me at 7 o'clock. Show up at this meeting. Did you eat lunch? I mean, these are the kind of things that help people get back into being human and normalized. Then they don't know that they don't know, they can't see that they can't see, because it's never been part of their experience or life skills. 4, a sponsor must never take advantage of a sponsee in any way. Those are just 4 items from his experience. Bill Wilson has a wonderful paragraph on page 18 in the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous that looks like it approaches talking about sponsorship. He doesn't use the word. He says the X problem, no, page 18, it's in italics, which is the Big Book's way of highlighting. But the X problem drinker, okay, so this person isn't drinking any longer, there's a criteria, who has found this solution, they're in AA, who is properly armed with facts about himself, okay, he's probably done at the minimum a 4th and 5th step, can generally win the entire confidence of another alcoholic in a few hours. Until such an understanding is reached, that is, properly armed with facts about yourself, little or nothing can be accomplished. When my sponsor and I, Lloyd, read this paragraph, he said, Herb, you're not eligible to be a sponsor until you've done your 4th and 5th step, because that was his literal interpretation of this. And I would agree if, in fact, it's somebody who's going to take somebody through the steps. If, in fact, it's somebody who is just going to connect to somebody to show them the ropes of AA, perhaps give them a ride if they don't have a car, perhaps meet with them and have coffee and be a sounding board for them. I don't have any problem with somebody who hasn't done their 4th and 5th step trying to help somebody else out and being called the sponsor at that. So I don't have any rules. All right, because AA has no rules, and I've adopted literally and fundamentally the principles of AA, all right? Both their direction with regard to spiritual principles and their direction with regard to the other principles on to how to live your life. Bill Wilson suggested that there are only 2 disciplines in Alcoholics Anonymous. Now, this was in the context of his preparation of the traditions, and people were saying, we don't need any guidelines, we don't need any requirements, we don't need any laws. And Bill says, these are not laws and regulations, these traditions. These are guidelines based on our experience. These are principles based on our experience. And then he made the comment, there are only 2 disciplines in Alcoholics Anonymous. One is God and the other is alcohol. And you're either going for one or you're going for the other. If you've had any exposure to me at all, you know about the dimmer switch. But those of you who haven't, a dimmer switch, unlike this switch here, which is a light switch, and when you turn it on, it goes from dark to light in a nanosecond. Boom! kind of like a spiritual experience. Bill Wilson had that mystical mountaintop experience where the room filled with light, filled with God, filled with the presence, and he knew it. He was aware of it. It felt like he had been lifted up to the top of a mountain, that a clean wind blew through him, and he knew at the end of that 20-minute period, two things for sure, for certain. Number one, his alcoholism had been removed permanently. And number two, that his life's work, his destiny, his ministry was to help other people have that experience. Wow. Read page 14 in the big book and then other material in the AA literature. And it'll talk even more expansively than I just have. But then he put in the back of the big book, Appendix 2, page 567, 568, to clarify that not everybody, in fact, most people are not going to have that. They're going to have a slow educational variety process, and in my case, glacially slow. Whoa, it was 4 years before I worked the steps, and it was another 6 to 7 years before I finished working the steps. I worked them 3 times with 3 different people. That's why I say it that way. I make a distinction between a sponsor and a step guide. My sponsor's Lloyd. He is my sounding board. He has uncommon common sense. He knows how to do relationships. He knows how to do work. He knows how to do life. He knows how to do money. He knows how to do AA. Wonderful sounding board. Those might be some ingredients in sponsorship. He wasn't then as familiar with the big book and the step process as he is today, of course. So when I heard somebody share differently about going through the big book and the step process, I said to Lloyd, I'm really attracted to this guy. I'm going to ask him to be my step guide. You're going to be my sponsor forever, but this man's going to help me with the steps. And he said, Herb, good luck. You need all the help you can get. Yeah, but there's another ingredient for sponsorship. They're not tethered to me in ownership. He had no ego invested in me. What he was invested in is my recovery, my development. And whatever would serve that, he was totally supportive of. There's another ingredient of sponsorship. If a sponsor doesn't have your best interest at heart, fire them. All right? Your life is on the line here. Not just the quality of your life, that too, but your very life. And I'm assuming that's true for the Al-Anon. Because if you don't get well, somebody's bound to shoot you. Maybe I can't talk like that anymore, but I like to lighten it up a little bit. Right, okay. So then he goes on to talk about, page 18, kind of a job description of a sponsor, without ever saying it, but this is my interpretation. I wonder what it means when it says that the man who is making the approach has had the same difficulty. Oh, alcoholic. That he obviously knows what he is talking about. Oh, he has some information. That his whole deportment shouts at the new prospect that he is a man with a real answer. Notice his deportment. That is, his demeanor, his manner, his very being shouts that he is a man with a real answer. Notice it's not his mouth. All right? I'm reminded of a phrase from a 4th century Catholic bishop, Augustine. And he was, of course, talking about the gospel, and he was talking about evangelization. But hear what he said and translate it into the context of what we're talking about today. He said, wherever you are in the world, preach the good news. If you have to, use words. Yeah? Gandhi said that. Be the change that you want to affect. Be the change that you want to affect. that he has no attitude of holier than thou. He's not a righteous person. Now, part of my human frailty, as with everybody's, I believe, is once you have a powerful spiritual awakening, as I did in 1988, then I thought that I knew the way and I was the light and I was the Pied Piper of AA, and if you lined up behind me and danced to my music, you would be saved like I was. Well, it's a bit righteous, and it's very normal. I see it all the time with people who have an authentic spiritual awakening, spiritual experience. But if it's authentic, and if they stay gently pressed up against it, they will, the spirit will enter in and round off the edges. And I just remembered that I think I got distracted from the light and the mystical experience and the dimmer switch, which I never did explain. I take little side roads. And so in contrast to the light that boom goes on, the dimmer switch goes on at a very low level, but with a little gentle twist, it goes up a notch. With another little push, it goes up a notch. With another little more energy and leaning into it, it goes up another notch. And the light gets brighter and brighter and brighter until we begin to see that we don't see and know that we don't know. And that's the beginning of a spiritual awakening, all right? But it might take, as it did with me, 11 months of doing these steps. And I just did it. I put my head down, shoulder to the wheel, you know, all that good task-oriented type A personality stuff. And I never was conscious of what was happening when it was happening. But once I completed the steps, and I looked back over my shoulder, completed step 9, finished step 9. Yes, you can finish step 9. You need to be creative about it. You need to be in prayer about it. You need guidance from experienced sponsors or step guides about it. But you can finish your 9th step. And if you haven't, you're still in the spiritual cancer, very subject to relapse. If you have not finished your 9th step. Personal experience, as I watch other people. So a dimmer switch is that electronic tool that goes up a notch at a time, and it turns the lights on incrementally and gradually. As part of that mental image, I see that dimmer switch is on a greased axle, and its natural inclination is to go backwards. And so I use the mental image or metaphor of staying gently pressed up against it to push it forward with accountability in sponsorship, to push it forward with prayer and meditation, hopefully on a consistent daily basis, to push it forward with daily inventory, 10th step, to push it forward with compassionate service attitude 24/7. Click, click, click. The dimmer switch goes up a notch at a time. But it doesn't rest where you put it because it's spring-loaded to go backwards. Dr. Tebow, the psychiatrist that supported Bill Wilson, said Bill was absolutely right. The 12 steps are for the deflation of the ego at depth. But the ego has an uncanny natural ability to regenerate itself. And that's what our 10th step is about. Spot check inventory. Do inventory. On the spot. When I am disturbed, the 12 and 12 says, it's a spiritual axiom. When I am disturbed, there is something wrong with me. I hate that. But it is absolute truth. And when I adopt that truth that I am responsible for my feelings, I am responsible for my behavior, I am responsible for my life 100%, no exceptions. Well, what about justified resentment? There is none. There is none. What about forgiveness? They did more harm to me. Get over it. Sorry, I'm a real hard ass. Get over it. I distributed a meditation on forgiveness. Not that we're talking about it, but I feel so passionate that this is the concluding process that began in step 4, that ends with step 9, that precipitates the final springboard to a spiritual awakening, forgiveness. And when you look it up in the dictionary, look up at my fist. Look up at my fist. You look it up in the dictionary, the word forgiveness, you know all it means is a decision to release them. That's all it means. A decision to release them. And as the Our Father says, and as the prayer of St. Francis says, in the process of releasing them, we are released. And not a moment sooner. And so I've put it here because I just feel that it would be of value to you as part of your reading, as part of your meditation practice, as well as I handed out the meditation practice that I've established as the foundation of my meditation practice. I will be talking about that tomorrow, but I just felt that you may or may not be available to, or interested in the topic tomorrow, and that it would be serve a purpose if you took it, and more if you would like them, because there's plenty. Because I do believe the 11th step is the heart of the matter here. And I come to that by a full experience with step 1. It took 10 years for me to have a full experience with step 1. In my first 4 years, it was the drama, 502s and blackouts that said I'm an alcoholic. And then when I did this work the first time, I saw the doctor's opinion, and I knew that I had an allergy that produced a phenomenon of craving. And then in 1991, I did the steps again, and I didn't know that I didn't know. And this man knew that I didn't know. And he spent a lot of time with me on the mental obsession and the delusion. And once I got this experience that, in fact, I am powerless because my mind is defective. I had never seen that before. I'm 51 years old with lots of background in self-reflection and self-help and education, and I had never seen how defective, because I was looking through the lens that was deformed. And as long as I'm looking through a blue lens, you're going to be blue. And as long as I'm looking through a pink lens, you're going to be pink. And Chuck C. had it exactly right for the name of his book on a retreat that he did that was transcribed into a book. A new pair of glasses. I need a new pair of glasses. I need new lenses through which to see, because the lenses I'm looking through, I cannot see the lens, because that's what I'm looking through. And this work gives us a new pair of glasses, gives us a new lens, gives us a penetration into the delusional belief system, all right, that we have. And so I went on and did the work the third time with a man in 1994 who introduced me to the set-aside prayer for the very first time, and the bedevilments, unmanageability, all right, on page 52 in the big book. I won't go into that right now because that's not our role of step work, but it gave me a real experience of powerlessness 10 years sober. And what it said is, I have no power of choice. Bill Wilson confirms that on page 62 when he talks about what the nature of those bedevilments are, what the nature of unmanageability is. And he uses the term in the 12 and 12, we have a cancer of the soul. A spiritual cancer. See, alcohol is not our problem. Bill Wilson's very clear on page 64 and 103 that bottles are only a symbol. Alcohol is only a symptom of our problem. Alcohol is not the problem. Now, if in fact you're sitting here and you've been drinking, or in fact you're obsessed with drinking, or the analogous whatever fellowship you're in, well then clearly the first half of the first step is a problem. but there's nothing you can do about it. Sorry. Well, what does it mean, powerless? If there's anything that you can do about your alcohol or your brokenness, if there's anything you can do or know or say or feel, then you have power. This is not AA heresy. This is, in fact, the underlying truth. It means powerless. I have no choice. When I put alcohol in me, it's a biological mandate to drink. When I don't have alcohol in me, it's a psychological mandate to drink. And when I am not drinking through the grace of God and I'm in AA, I am still subject to the bedevilments and the spiritual malady and the cancer of the soul. And Bill Wilson suggests on page 62, selfishness-self-centeredness. That we think is the root of our trouble. And he says, not only do we need to get rid of it, but in the final paragraph he says, neither could we reduce our self-centeredness much by wishing or trying on our own power. No choice. Oh, I'll work the steps. No choice. You see, the steps are not here as an object of our task. The steps are here as the medium of the task to find God. And if you get nothing from this talk and exploration of sponsorship, but this one concept, I think I will feel very satisfied. And that is, the role of a sponsor is to point the way. To point the way to the mystery. For we to have an authentic relationship with the mystery. That's the job of sponsorship, nothing else. There's lots of other minor roles, as I said with my sponsor, finance, relationships, work, principles, AA, lots of information and formation that I needed to have. But this man who took me through the work said, Herb, you look up again. You have a lot of information. And you've had from that information a lot of formation. You formed some pretty bad habits. But it's never connected to your experience. And when you connect information that is formation, and you connect it to your experience, you have transformation. And there's the set-aside prayer. To set aside and be disconnected, to not know that I don't know, and I begin to commit to that, and I begin to know that I don't know, and that I can't see that I don't see. And so I was speaking this way at a regular AA meeting, and a woman was listening intently. I could see her writing. And after the talk was over, she came up with a napkin and gave it to me, and she said, this is from my religious tradition. She was from Iran, and one of her readings, one of her mentors had written this, I'm not sure who, but it's a Persian proverb. Very relevant to sponsorship. He who knows not, and knows not that he knows not, is a fool. Shun him. He who knows not and knows that he knows not is a child. Teach him. He who knows and knows not that he knows is asleep. Wake him. He who knows and knows that he knows is wise. Follow him. Nice. And so there are many, many takes on sponsorship, probably as many as there are people in a room, and there are hopefully find one that is effective for yourself. Chapter 7 in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous is entitled Working with Others. And when you read it as the instruction manual, the chapter on the instruction manual for sponsorship, you'll have a different experience with that. I suggest that. Read and highlight chapter 7 in the big book as a instruction process for working with somebody else. There's 10 or 15 different process steps, not the least of which get to know them, get to know all about them, give them the big book, help them if they want help. In other places, Bill suggests that we help them with step 3 and we help them with step 5. And my experience is that my step guide helped me with step 7 as a prayer and helped me certainly with the guidance on steps 8 and 9. The most sacred work of sponsorship, I believe, or step guidance, is in the step 8 and 9 function. To get really clear on the harm that I have done, to get really clear on the reparation that I need to make. The harm that I have done, how did I negatively impact them? And what's the process of repairing the damage? A very sacred role. And in fact, it may be that the sponsor doesn't have experience in that particular situation. My sponsor had enough humility and enough care for me that he sent me to other people who had experience. If I had a legal problem, he sent me to an attorney. If I had a tax problem, he sent me to an accountant. If I had a psychological problem or in relationship, he sent me to a psychologist. All people in the program, for their experience based on their professional information and their experience in the program. And then he was the sounding board for the final process of doing the step 9 amends. And so I've got a list here that a sponsor is not. They're not a teacher or a parent or a preacher or a disciplinarian or a babysitter or an employer or an accountant or a therapist or a financier or an attorney or a tax consultant or an MD or a pharmacist. Well, they may in fact be a pharmacist, but it's probably inappropriate for them to give that kind of professional advice in this personal relationship. Number one, they can't be objective, and number two, they're taking on a tremendous responsibility and potential liability, all right? But I hear it all the time. We've had 4 people up on the hill in the last 20 years commit suicide because they believed what they were told in their meeting that they needed to get off their medication, all right? Very dangerous stuff. I have no opinion about medication. Well, of course I do. But I don't do it publicly. I don't do it publicly. I'm very supportive of medication and I'm very supportive of therapy, okay? But I have no opinion for you at all. I'll send you to the experts. Oh, you remember I was saying that the sponsor points the way to God. The Buddhists have this wonderful story about the master who's pointing the way to the mystery. And unfortunately, the students begin adoring the finger. See, that captures for me the difference between spirituality and religion. Spirituality is, in fact, finding a connection to the mystery. Religion should be the tool that helps us find the mystery. Unfortunately, it's the human condition. It becomes self-enclosed and a membership club, and then it has some rules as to how you need to participate. There are many meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous that have become cults and religion, all right? And it's just what it is. They go through phases. Hopefully they don't last too long, the phase or the meeting. So exactly. So I see one of the primary ingredients of a sponsor is somebody who is available. I get all the time from people who are complaining about their relationship with their sponsor that they don't return calls, they can't see them, they're not available, or they can't give them time to do a fifth step. Well, I understand people are busy, or I understand people don't want to do that. That's okay. But move on. Move on. Your life is at stake. If somebody doesn't have the time for you, that's no judgment on them. It certainly is a judgment on you the longer you say that they should have. I mean, how about dealing with reality? All right? There's a great book by Katie Byron, Loving What Is, if you're ever interested. It's very simple, very approachable, not in any type of 12-step vocabulary, and yet underneath is the spiritual principle of taking personal responsibility and dealing with reality. I've heard recently, and in fact I've been shocked by it recently, 6 different men who I've traveled this path for 25 years who did this work that I'm talking about out of the big book and the steps precisely and had spiritual awakenings, every one of them. Some of them I took through the steps. Most of them were done by other people, but I could observe and I could hear because they came to our meeting what had happened to them. And within this last year, 2 of them drank after 20 years of sobriety and really full-on spiritual evolution transformation. 2 of them drank, and the other 4, although they made a lot of money and are independently wealthy, they were disconnected somehow from the core of the program. And 1 lost his business, and 2 lost their marriage, and the other one's life is so unhappy that he's almost clinically depressed. And I don't think it's coming from emotions and psychology, it's coming from a metastasized spiritual cancer. All right? And I've had the privilege of sitting with each of them and asking them about what's going on in their life, or sort of what their last 20 years has been like. And everyone, I'll bottom line it because it took hours to do this, but every one of them said to me in so many words, well, when I went through the steps and I had my powerful spiritual awakening, the man who took me through the steps said, and that was their sponsor at the time, now we're equal and God is your sponsor. And every one of them did not then have an active relationship with a sponsor. Oh, they kept calling their step guide sponsor, but they didn't call them. They didn't reveal to them their secrets. They didn't reveal to them their concerns and their troubles. They didn't have the connection of intimacy that it requires for you to just share your soul and heart with somebody without fear of recrimination or embarrassment, or at least fatal embarrassment. You'll always be embarrassed, all right? Yeah, in fact, my sponsor and my therapist regularly say, oh, that must be really embarrassing. Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Yeah, what you did? Oh, maybe you just heard what I have a sponsor, I have a step guide, I have a therapist, and I have a spiritual director. These are 4 different men that I work with on a regular basis, all right, over the last 20, 25 years. Because I hold myself accountable at many, many levels because I'm a person who's given to self-deceit. I know from my experience that I will lose contact with reality. And I will create reality. And I won't know that it's a delusion. And I know that. I know that from my experience. It scares me. So I want to stay connected to people who will hold the mirror up and reflect back to me who I am and reflect back to me the truth. They love me enough to tell me the truth that might hurt my feelings and might destroy our relationship. But they're not attached to the relationship. They're attached to my best interest. If that's a definition of sponsorship, man, you should, write it down. They're attached to my welfare, not my relationship with them. One of the there's a lot of ingredients in the 12-step sponsorship book as to what a good sponsor is, but one of the ones I really liked was they're enjoying their sobriety. All right? Now, yeah, I mean, you hear all the time, easy does it. That's not my motto. You might get that. My motto is heavy does it, but I survive it besides that. But I have a sense of humor, okay? I try not to take myself seriously. I take my disease seriously. I take my spiritual effort seriously. I take my relationship with the mystery seriously. I take my responsibility to my family and my friends and my sponsors seriously. But I try not to take myself seriously. And quite frankly, I've got 2 adult daughters, one 20 years in AA, one 20 years in Al-Anon, who have done the work out of the big book with a step guide and had transforming experiences. And they have personally accepted the role of keeping me humble. Yes. They will tell me the truth. So, Dad, sounds like you're not really doing your 10-step very well. Oh, damn, I just got another call. And so they, at the very least, they have what you want. At the very most, they're a demonstration that they might be a resource for you who doesn't want what you have. You heard it in the book. It says, if you want what we have, well, you might not know what they have. Watch their feet, not their mouth. My wife has a great saying, trust is earned, never given. And it's earned from consistent behavior, not consistent words. Thank you, Michael. One of the biggest keys, I believe, to sponsorship is to listen. Every one of us loves to be heard, and heard deeply, and really heard. All right? I think that's probably the effectiveness of therapy, is that you're paying them, so they're going to sit there and listen to you. Yeah? But they also have some training in helping you sort out the stuff. So if in fact you're a sponsor or thinking about being a sponsor, know that it's really important for people to be heard, to be listened to. And it might take 5 minutes or it might take an hour. And that's all about your time, and you have to establish appropriate boundaries for yourself if you're the listener. I've also learned a phrase, meet them where they are. This is very powerful. Meet them where they are, not where you want them to be, or not where you are, or not where they should be. Meet them where they are. All right? And then begin compassionately to show them a path out of the pit. And so I do listen compassionately. But I'm also pretty much taking all of the men I sponsor through the steps, or at least I have in the past, and they continue to keep me a sponsor. And when we're in the step work especially, but even afterwards, if they call and they're in whine mode, they're in trouble mode or whatever, and I'm compassionate to a degree about that, I will eventually ask them how they're doing on their 9th step, or on their 11th step, or on their 10th step, or what they're doing in service. I will get them connected to a very tangible, measurable part of this 12-step process, and you'd be surprised how soon the call ends. Well, yeah, exactly. Thank you. You got it. That's it. I have words like, and these are intuitive. Ask questions, not so much quick with the answers. A step guide, a sponsor, is a person who knows the right questions to ask and is not so quick to impress you with their information or to teach you their information. That just really robs you, or robs the person, the sponsee, of having their experience and the challenge of their journey finding the answer. If you ask the right question, the answer will have meaning. If you're given an answer without the question, water off a duck. It doesn't connect. Encourages, non-judgmental. I've used the word compassionate over and over and over again. It's the heart of my attempted attitude. Open, inclusive, humble. What does humble mean? Humble means, coming from the Latin word humus, earth, dirt, one of many, nothing special. Humble is also the truth, all right? I have some gifts with regard to articulating the 12-step process and the spiritual path. That's not pride. It would be pride for me to say, oh, no, I'm just another guy. It's not true. All right? I have a special gift and some experience and the ability to communicate it. I know that, but it is a gift. You heard that. It's a gift. All right? And with that comes a responsibility. Hopefully I can share it and make a difference. Anonymous. None of my sponsees know who I sponsor. My wife does not know who I sponsor unless they've left the message of their name and the voice. She now knows. She even talks to them when I'm not there. She'll do. So I'm very big on that. I don't disclose. I'll be in a car with a couple people who, in fact, I'm sponsoring, but they don't know it. And it's really fun when they discover it right there. Oh. Because it's nobody's business. I'm asked all the time, how many people do you sponsor? And I honestly don't know. Now, my inclination is to have a list and to count every day. Because you see, I want the epaulette on the shoulder. I'm a general in AA. Yeah, it's not good for my ego to even do that, so I don't pay any attention. I sponsor people one day, one sponsee at a time. Okay? Confidentiality is absolutely key. If you've ever been betrayed by a lack of confidence or somebody revealing something, then you need to make a different decision. It's really unfortunate. It's a betrayal of a very sacred trust. Oh, please, yeah. And you are? Beverly. Yes.
You want them to form a relationship with each other so that they can help hold each other up.
Yes.
What's that in conflict with what you're saying? I've not ever heard it put that way.
All right. And actually, thank you very much for, number one, listening and being engaged, and then asking that question, because it's a very relevant question. I'm going to repeat it, and that is, so what about sponsors who have sponsee meetings in their house or whatever, so they in fact can do the steps together, or they find there's a brotherhood or a sisterhood that can be very supportive in a sort of a sub-community. And it works for people. It would not work for me, but it works for a lot of people, and I don't discourage it. I don't have any real opinion. Well, actually, I have an opinion about it. I like it for when it is really supporting the recovery process. If it's a club that becomes inclusive, and we talk about our legacy of sponsorship that goes back to Bill and Bob, then I have a little problem with that. okay? But the way you expressed it in terms of a little community, fraternity, sorority of people that are walking the path and supporting one another, I love it. I just love the trust that will develop and the bond that will develop and the support that will develop, the intimacy. I just love all of that. And so I think that's on a case by, figure it out. Maybe that's why Bill didn't use the term sponsor in the book. He didn't want to get too involved. He just wanted the spiritual principles to guide people. Wonderful. Thank you. So what about, should they be like? How do I find a sponsor? I mean, first of all, I recommend to anybody to pray. All right? I'm a huge believer in prayer. Prayer doesn't change God. Prayer opens my mind. Prayer opens my heart. Prayer opens my spirit. I don't know how it works, but I'm confident it's in that direction. By my definition, God can't change. If God can change, it could become something it wasn't. And my experience and my faith decision is that God is everything, infinite, was never created, will never not be, a concept beyond our ability to understand it. So that's why I have adopted consistently the word mystery. All right? Bill used the word higher power as a deflection from religious tradition and theology and dogma, which began to develop in the use of the term God. It doesn't have to be that way, but that's the way it is. People are conditioned to the word God as connected to organized religion. God is not it. God is not the mystery. God is the symbol of the mystery, is the symbol of it. And the Hindus call it Brahman, and the Jews call it Yahweh, and the Muslims call it Allah, and the Christians call it Jesus and the Trinity. And we call it God or higher power. And that's a process you go through in steps 2 and 3 to come up with your own concept. The silver bullet of Alcoholics Anonymous, from my standpoint, when Ebby Thatcher said to Bill, choose your own concept. See, we don't have any dogma. We have no rules. We have no theology. That's the real benefit of inclusivity. Oh, so then I pray to open my heart and my mind, and somehow the energy, the spirit, the mystery enters in, and I'm placed within about 30 days in a place where I'm very confident who should take me through the steps. Now, in the third time I went through the steps, a person was placed in my spirit within about a week, which I said, nope, not possible. That person's very dysfunctional. But it persisted for 3 months. And it was the only name and image that came to me. Eventually, I engaged this man to help me with the steps. It took 2 years, and it was the most powerful experience I ever had. I ended the work with that step guide still not wanting anything he had. Yeah. But he was a fabulous teacher and guide in the spiritual process of the steps. So ask yourself the question, and I don't have an answer, should the sponsor be like me or different? Yes, they should be one or the other. Well, yeah, of course. Some people choose for different reasons, and it's all probably driven by your lizard brain here, and you won't know why you're choosing. You'll think you know, and it's a delusion. So it doesn't matter. Choose anyway. Exactly. Because it's not a contract. You can always change it. So many people are so connected to the decision they made that despite the fact they can't see him, they won't return the call, and they're rude when they do talk, they won't terminate the relationship. All right? Don't understand that, except again, codependency, okay? And it's another big component in our spiritual malady. I have had people approach me who wanted to be sponsored by me, and then after about 3 or 4 weeks, they wanted to hang out. I don't hang out, all right? You might know that already, but I don't hang out. And once they learned that, they needed something else, so they went on their way. I have never fired any sponsee. Some people, a lot of people with long years and a lot of respect that I have for them, experience, disagree with me. One, in fact, said to me, we were on a panel on sponsorship when I made that comment. He said, Herb, you're giving them the delusion they have a sponsor when, in fact, they're not doing what you say and they're not calling you. Okay. That's on them, not on me. Okay? But I don't put myself in a position of terminating the relationship. People terminate it. Here's how it works with me. As a sponsor, I make suggestions. If you take my suggestions, there will be consequences. If you don't take my suggestions, there will be consequences. Choose your consequences. I'm not responsible for your life, and I'm not attached to your recovery. Sounds cold, but when you get underneath it, it's absolutely sound psychology and sound philosophy and spiritual principle. I am not attached to your happiness. I am passionate about your having a spiritual awakening, and I will work as hard as you work. I won't work any harder than you do. I won't chase you, all right? But I'm not responsible for it, whether you have it or don't have it. I'm not attached to it, okay? So that's another principle that I use that works very well. How about men and women? I went through this work in 1988 and had a very powerful experience. Began to share it with men. And of course, the community began to get a little buzz about that. And so the women came to me and they said, there aren't any women that we know that have done the steps this way. We want that experience. Would you take? And I said, no. At first. Then it preyed on me because I took it into prayer, and I went to my sponsor and he said, well, maybe you could help. I went to my wife. She goes, maybe you could help, but I'm so concerned about that, given your history. Read between the lines. And they both finally said, why don't you do it for a while? And so I took 5 women through the steps. 4 of them I know, I have tracked, and they're still doing the work. I stopped, though, after the 5th one because I read the AA pamphlet, maybe for the first time or certainly with a new pair of glasses, and it says in there, we suggest from our common experience, notice, no rules, we suggest from our common experience, men work with men and women work with women. It's obvious reasons. I don't have to go into that. And I thought, all my life I've been making myself an exception. I'm going to go with our common wisdom, with our common experience. And I stopped working with women. Now, the pipe had been seeded, and now, fortunately, certainly in the South Bay and on the West Side, there are plenty of men and women who have done this work and out of the big book and the steps and are willing to be step guides, not sponsors necessarily, but also sponsors. It's the best combination if you can have a step guide and sponsor as one person from my standpoint. It's just not my experience. What about more than one? If you're in more than one fellowship, I think you should have a person in each fellowship. Once again, the ideal would be if you're a compulsive eater and an AA person, you found a compulsive eater and AA person as a sponsor. That's perfect. Yeah, but it doesn't always work that cleanly. And so you might end up with 2 or 3 different sponsors, but then you have to help them and yourself define the roles so that you're not using mom and dad strategies to, get your own way or to foster your own self-deceit. My biggest concern with me, it may not be yours, my biggest concern is self-deceit. I will not know. I will not see. With all the information and spiritual evolution that I've had, I know today, when I look over my shoulder, that I missed something yesterday, or I shaded something and I didn't see that I was shading it, or I held something back. No big secrets anymore, but just held it, kind of like held it. There's where the worm is in the wood. There's where my sponsor trained me early on. I told you, he said, tell me what you're thinking, feeling, or doing. He said, and the object of that is transparency. Accountability. I said, what are you talking about? I mean, I'm 1 month sober. And he said, I want your insides and your outsides to begin to match. I still didn't know what he was talking about, but you know how we do it. Yes, Lloyd. Yeah. And today I know exactly what he's talking about. Accountability, transparency, having your insides and your outsides match. Yeah, absolutely. That's called integrity. That's called operating on principle. Oh, my sponsees get so tired of my final bottom line. I don't know what to suggest, but pray, take the high road, and always operate on principle. Herb, do we always have to take the high road? Yep. Do we always have to operate on principle? Yep. Well, no, you don't actually. Choose your consequences. If I really want to fly, and I read a book on flying, and I practice flying, and I build wings to fly, and I exercise for a year, and I passionately want to fly with my wings, and I go to the top of a 30-story building to today's the day I'm going to fly, and I jump off, what's going to happen? I'm going to die. I'm going to die. Because the law of gravity, a physical principle, has no investment in what I want, what I know, what I practice, and how I feel. No. Spiritual principles are just like that. See, God might, this is Herb now, Herb. Yellow flag's up, Herb's opinion. God does not punish us. Our behavior punishes us because we transgress spiritual principles of humility and love and compassion and integrity. All the other spiritual principles that we know or don't know of, all right? And when we cross over and transgress spiritual principles, they crush us, just like gravity. And that's what the 12th step says, right? Carry the message, because the nature of the disease, I quoted it earlier, page 62, self-centeredness. And the antidote for self-centeredness is other-centeredness. It's that simple. That's the turning of the steps. Read page 59 in the big book as the preface to the step process. Read Bill's story, page 14. Simple but not easy. A price has to be paid. It meant the destruction of self-centeredness. We must turn in all things to the Father of light who presides over us all. This is all about turning. Step 3, made a decision to turn from self to others. I have a Einstein cartoon. Again, I periodically like to lighten it up, but it's not my normal inclination. But Einstein's at a board. I usually am interactive with the board, but today it didn't move me. And it's fictitious. Einstein's at a board, and he's written something on the board, and he's looking back at the class. The average alcoholic is very much capable of such feelings as love, affection, intimacy, and caring. These feelings just do not involve anyone else. Exactly. So the heart of the problem is self-centeredness. That's the spiritual malady. That's the definition of unmanageability. That's the cancer of the soul. And the step process is the turning from self-centeredness to other-centeredness. That's why in step 10 we keep the channel clear. In step 11 we sit in the presence of other, filling the channel with power. And in step 12 we allow the channel to flow out so that the water doesn't become stagnant. The grace, our life, doesn't become stagnant. The antidote for self-centeredness is other-centeredness. I mean, these are ancient spiritual principles. All right? What did the Pharisees say, the attorneys of the Judaic time, to Jesus when he asked, what's the primary laws? They said, puffing up, we know what the primary laws are, because we're attorneys, you know. Love God with all your heart, with all your mind, and with all your strength. And love your neighbor as yourself. Step 11, step 12. And Jesus said, that's it. That is the covenant, but I'm replacing that covenant with the new covenant. Love God with all your heart, with all your strength, with all your mind, and love your neighbor as God loves you. All right? Turned it up a little bit, the burner a little bit, I think. A little higher standard. Our step 11 is to sit in the presence of power, to be empowered. If you come tomorrow, we'll talk about that for a couple hours, meditation. The Big Book has the most precise, fundamental, and effective instructions on meditation that I have ever come across in my total experience, academically or personally. And it is the basis of my own personal meditation practice. I have handed it out in case you can't make it, and so you're welcome to take that and then read that material and perhaps do your own work. And then step 12 is other-centered, all right? Because it says, carry the message of a spiritual awakening. You do not have to live like this. Not just drink. You don't have to live like this any longer. You can be awake to the fact that you've been asleep and that regularly fall asleep. And then it says, practice these principles in all our affairs. And chapter 8 is to the wives. It's really significant others today. Chapter 9 to the family. Practice these principles with your significant relationship with your family. Chapter 10 to the employer. Practice these principles at work. Chapter 11, although it's camouflaged with the title, A Vision for You, when you read the chapter, it's talking about practicing principles in your community, practicing principles in your fellowship. Chuck C.'s book again, New Pair of Glasses, I read it early in my recovery and it began to change me without even doing steps because he had an operating principle. He went to his family, said, how can I help you do what you need to do? He went to his employees. He had 300 employees. He owned the company. What can I do to help you do what you do? And then he went to his clients. He was the primary salesman. He went to his clients and he said, how can I help you do what you need to get done? Well, his family healed. His workers loved him and produced wonderfully for him. And his clients trusted him because they knew he meant it. It wasn't a flim-flam manipulation. He meant it. He would disadvantage himself in favor of helping them. We practice these principles in all our affairs. We have to know what the principles are. I believe that we have to stay accountable in an intimate relationship with a sponsor so that, in fact, we are reminded regularly of what the principles are and what the transgression is. If you're uncomfortable in any way, if you're disturbed in any way, it means that you're transgressing a principle. That's what it says in the 12 and 12, doesn't it? In step 10. It's a spiritual axiom. Whenever I am disturbed, no qualification. Whenever I am disturbed, there is something wrong with me. And step 10 says in the big book, watch for resentment, fear, dishonesty, and selfishness when they crop up, not if. We're humans. We never transcend our humanity. When they crop up. He calls it in the 12 and 12 a spot check inventory. That was the benefit of me giving a fifth step to a woman. It was an experiment. I'm very open to not be blocked by expectations, mine or anybody else's, and trying to find a way to have a broader, bigger, all-inclusive experience. And so I shared my fifth step with the man who took me through the steps, with my best friend with whom I always share my fifth step, and I chose a woman who I had taken through the steps. And she was the only one that called me on it. Oh, her pretty sloppy on your 10th step, huh? Well, it had been 3 or 4 years since I'd done a fifth step, and the whole reason I was doing a 3-hour fifth step with her is that it had accumulated. It had accumulated because I was sloppy on my 10th step. But she's the only one that loved me enough to hurt my feelings. Yeah. She's still my friend. Questions? I'm going on and on. Okay, yeah. Let's have some questions from your experience or from what we've shared here today, and perhaps I'll interject some other stuff, please. Is a what? A goal. Oh, yes. 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 I get this from the Al-Anons and the codependents in my workshops regularly, this question about other-centeredness, because isn't that the reason I'm in Codependence Anonymous or in Al-Anon, is that I'm giving myself away too much. And when they get underneath the motive, it's not about other-centeredness, it's about my controlling others, my manipulating others. If only you would do what I expect you to, or be who I expect you. And with the step process, they begin to see that underneath, that it's really about me, really. And it's not about them, really. But I've sent people to professional help for codependency for the very reason that they have a hard time from family of origin or just a biological, neurological predisposition, all right, to get some help. All right, I just learned of a hospital in Kentucky that specializes in codependency, 30-day to 90-day program. I was just blown away, right? Yeah, thank you. Great question. Any other, please? Jim.
I travel a lot. You talk about availability.
Yeah.
And I travel a lot.
Yeah. Yeah.
I have stopped taking on new sponsors
Yeah.
for that reason, because I feel I don't have enough availability. Any comment on that?
Well, here's a man who's got long-term sobriety, longer than mine, and he's been active in sponsorship, and now he's retired, and he's traveling a lot. So he's taking a very responsible attitude. I no longer have the time that I had before, and I have to put some boundaries around it for their benefit. Absolutely. And you'll figure it out, as you have and do, of course. Now, the telephone works really well, but not on a long-term basis, especially in a new relationship. My sponsor lives in St. Louis, and he used to live here and moved several years ago. But we had such a strong relationship. The telephone works really well for us 2, 3, 4 times a week, and then we see each other about 4 times a year, either me here or him there. Yeah. So, it's all individual too. Work it out, be responsible. What do they need? And what can you give? Yeah. Deanna.
A couple things I'll share real quickly. I'm in the middle of my 4th step. I take people so I set down some guidelines that I felt would help, because that's the only experience I have with sponsorship. Never heard from her again, which is, I think, is a blessing, because I don't think I was really ready, and maybe she felt that and she doesn't know how to say that, and I have no problem with that. But how do you, is there a point where you really feel like, you know, when you're ready? I mean, how do you, I'm not quite sure, do I really know that I'm feeling confident enough to be a sponsor?
You may not feel confident. Do it anyway. Yeah. Share with them what you have received and no more. Don't try to be Herb. Be Diane. All right? You share with them what you've learned, what you've experienced, and stay one step in front of them. All right? Work with your sponsor, getting guidance on how to do that, or maybe not to do it until you've reached a certain level. Sponsor direction here is absolutely critical. I sat down with a man who was a trustee at large, General Service Office. That's a big responsible position. He had 30 years of sobriety. He sponsored a lot of people. He was a master at the step work. And I had lunch with him one-on-one. It was a real privilege. And I said, Don, how do you do it? You have a family. You have a job. Oh, he said, that's pretty straightforward. He said, my wife and I meet at the beginning of each year, and we open a calendar, and we determine what the family is going to want from me for the year, and we sit down once a month to fine-tune it. I go through my calendar with regard to what my employer has paid me to do, what my responsibilities are. He said, then all the white spaces, AA owns me. Yeah. I thought, wow, that's pretty tricky. That's really nice. So it's about just being responsible, and as with Jim, it changes over time. Life evolves, and yesterday's guidelines may not be appropriate today. Exactly, please.
Mike Alcoholic.
Mike.
Just to share on that, I had the same feeling, and when my sponsor first started sponsoring me, about every other time I'd ask him a question, he would send me to a person to go get the answer from them. And I didn't want to talk to that person, or I didn't know them, and I'd have to go ask them this question. But what it gave me is a fellowship base. So I don't feel like I'm really responsible for sponsoring somebody. I have so many people that I can call and ask the question to, that it's like, I don't feel adequate to sponsor a guy, but with all the fellowship and my sponsor, I feel they all and we all can.
Yeah. Well, and just so Michael's experience is that his sponsor sent him to people with experience, and he knew specifically where people had a sort of a treasure trove that uniquely plugged into what Michael's question was. There's real sponsorship. He doesn't try to be everything to everybody. It's just sort of very open and yeah.
My name is Christy, and I'm an Allen.
Christy.
I want to talk to you about meet them where they are.
Yes.
I have some experience in sponsorship, and I have a difficult particular situation. And the person is, you know, I'm a total believer in what you say about not firing them. What I'm asking about is they seem to be in the same place. They don't seem to be moving.
Yeah.
I appreciate what you said about distancing myself from their progress, you know, detaching from them.
Yeah.
But I'm hesitant in sitting down with them and really defining what their expectations are of me as a sponsor and what my expectations of a sponsee is. And I don't know how to go there. If you could help me with that transition, because it's not working for me. I don't think it's working for her, and I'd like some input on that.
You know, it's probably a question that needs some exploration on a one-on-one basis. And I'd be happy to do that after this, or pick up my card and give me a call, and we could explore that, because I just don't know right now what the right, but your heart's in the right place because you're looking to try to help that person. All right, just a little story of a similar. It just reminded me as you were talking. A man came to me with 10 years of sobriety, and he was, let's say, he was 30 years old, and he had just been fired from his third bellhop job. You get the picture? 10 years sober, 30 years old, just fired from his first bellhop job, third bellhop job. He said, I want you to sponsor me. I want you to take me through the steps. I said, okay. Well, we got to know each other. And finally I asked him, I said, well, what would you like to sort of aspire to in your career? And he said, I want to be a commercial airline pilot. I bit my tongue so I wouldn't laugh him out of the room. You know, because he's got no college education at all. He's been fired from his third bellhop job. Obviously, he has work issues. And he wants to be a commercial airline pilot. So we began the work, all right? And it took him 5 years to do his fourth step. I don't recommend it. I don't recommend it. And it took him another several years to finish his ninth step. But he did finish it. You know what he does today? He's a commercial airline pilot. Exactly. And he said to me when he finished his ninth step, thank you for not throwing me away. Because I'd had 10 years of sobriety and 10 sponsors. And I couldn't do it with their timetable and their way, and they all fired me. All right? Thank you for not throwing me away. See, I was not invested in his progress. I was invested in that he made progress, and I would stay pressed, to the extent he would. I don't know whether that's relevant or not, but it may help. So, thank you. Michael.
Thanks, sir. Wonderful workshop. Really well done. Just one comment I want to say, and I heard from my sponsor, so this is not a shill question. I'll ask a question in a second. But I've worked with several guys that have done the work like he's describing with workshops. My sponsorship has always been workshops, meeting once a week, and getting that big book between us. So when we get stuck, there's really a context to work out of. And the thing that shifted for me a long time ago, that's allowed me to stay here, I think, and keep growing, is that there's really no answers. There's just a lot of questions. And the big book is really a set of questions designed to keep going back to me, the student. And when I began to get, if I get stuck or off track, these guys kept saying, let's go back and see where we are in the work and take where you are. If you're stuck on inventory, then let's go back and see how step 3 is doing. And if we got to roll back to the beginning, to the title page and start again and come from a new place, it may be that alcoholism just flooded in so deeply that I can't see where it's at. And the beginning is, how did I get here? Why am I here? What's the purpose of being an Alcoholics Anonymous? And I do that with the guys I sponsor. I just keep asking questions. Well, what'd you get here? Let's take the steps out of the questions out of the book and write some experience of that and keep exploring that. Some guys it's deeper and some guys it's not. But it seems, I've seen guys shift. One of the guys I work with is here now, and he's real nearby, and I've seen him shift completely from this guy who was in survival to getting in his body and starting to understand. And he's calling me, telling me that. I know it's working, but he's telling me that he's having an experience. His life is changing. So, if you stop giving answers and start giving questions, Herb doesn't leave me with a lot of, he's up there, he's telling the truth. He doesn't give me a lot to answer. He just listens. He's very good at listening to me. He says, okay, well, let's see what happens. And really relying on God. And so my question to you, Herb, is when you may have already covered it today, but what do you do when you get, when you really set the tools out? What's the kind of tools you give guys to do the work, to kind of use that as the nail in the floor? Is there some tools you give to get started, or you won't work with them? And what do you think is there a criteria that you're using to get them centered into the work that you've been describing?
Michael asked, what tools do I suggest? The set-aside prayer and a good step meeting and I review with them the quality of the meetings that they're going to and the quantity of meetings. I'm a big believer that meetings and fellowship are important, but they're not the heart of the matter, all right? If, in fact, we could change by going to meetings, all right, the steps would be irrelevant. If we could change by going to meetings, it would be just, it's just too, it doesn't happen. It didn't happen to me. 4 years of meetings did not change me. It was only after I did the steps that I was changed. And I heard a speaker once say, expecting to be changed by going and sitting in a meeting is like expecting to become a car by sitting in your garage. I mean, it's silly, and yet it makes the point dramatically. Each one of us is uniquely prepared to a special gift. When Father Ed Dowling, I'm going to close with this. Father Ed Dowling was a Jesuit priest, not an AA, met Bill Wilson in 1940 because he read the big book and he noticed that it was a powerful spiritual tool. And he said at the end of that conversation, in which Bill brought him on as his spiritual director for the next 20 years, until Ed Dowling died in 1960. Ed Dowling, this Jesuit priest, said to Bill, Bill, you have a unique destiny. You have a unique gift. Because of your education, because of your family of origin, because of your biology, I'm expanding and paraphrasing, you have come to this point with a unique gift. And if you don't use this gift and give it away, it will never appear again in the world. I see that as a plan. Unique person. You have a fingerprint that never was and never will be. It's unique to you. Your life circumstances, your own biology, your DNA, your brain chemistry, your family of origin, your educational process, all of your addiction experiences, all of the debacles of your life and all of the successes of your life have made you who you are. And that is now particularly and singularly and uniquely useful to some one person. And that's our destiny. What a gift. Please join me in the prayer of St. Francis and listen to it as the prayer of turning. Listen to it as the prayer of being turned from self-centered to other-centered. Please join me in the prayer of St. Francis. It's on the back of the prayer page. Lord, make me a channel of thy peace, that where there is hatred, I may bring love, that where there is wrong, I may bring the spirit of forgiveness, that where there is discord, I may bring harmony, that where there is error, I may bring truth, that where there is doubt, I may bring faith, that where there is despair, I may bring hope, that where there are shadows, I may bring light, that where there is sadness, I may bring joy. Lord, grant that I may seek rather to comfort than to be comforted, to understand than to be understood, to love than to be loved. For it is by self-forgetting that one finds, it is by forgiving that one is forgiven, it is by dying that one awakens to eternal life. Amen. Thank you very much, and we'll see.
Sorry to interrupt your viewing. Taper Dave here. Just wanted to take a second to ask you to like and subscribe to my channel and let me know if you like what you're listening. I've got some very good talks here, and this one's a great one. Just curious, do you think this is better than Zoom? Tell me what you think. Okay, this is how I prepare my drone for launching. I like to do it inside the cab of my truck so I'm not standing outside in the weather. To install the joysticks for control, up and down, right and left, powered on. I have an Android phone that I use to connect it to the drone with. And it's actually controlled through the iPhone, through an app. Oops, wrong way. It's actually controlled through the iPhone, or through this Android phone, through the app. It's actually controlled through the Android phone, through an app, and you connect it through this short connection right here.
Remote control connected.
Remote control's connected. So I pull out the drone. I have to extend the legs. Long legs extended first, then the short legs. Remove the gimbal protector. Set that aside. Then power it on one short burst and one long burst. I lay it down. So I have to go to calibrate. So the drone's not connected yet. It shows you here as this drone gets disconnected, even though the remote's powered on. So the drone has to establish it's connected. So I go into the app to calibration mode. First I'll calibrate the remote controller. Start calibration. Out, in, oop, out, in, up, down, and then this little wheel is to control the gimbal. So it's calibrated. Go to gimbal calibration, start calibration, and then it calibrates the gimbal. I don't know if that shows up. The gimbal's moving all over the place. Changes, you can see it on the video. And I'm calibrated to take off. It's acquired 7 satellites at the moment. There are 26 satellites up in the sky, which it has to acquire before you can take off. So it's connected. It's got enough satellites. This is white. I can go to press this little arrow button, swipe right to take off, and it would start the motors if I slid this to the right, but I'll wait till I get outside. Don't want to do it inside.